Hello everyone, my name's Mike, welcome to Tech Car Moon, and today I'm going to be talking about the Panasonic Lumix G90 and why you should consider it when you're getting your next camera. Let's jump into it. So the way that YouTubers are going about things, they are saying that full frame is the only way to go. And I just don't think that's the case. I mean, I shoot on the Panasonic Lumix G80/G85 and I absolutely love this camera. I've used this for a solid year now and I still think it's a brilliant camera. There are a few things that I wish it had, which I'll go into in a moment, but for me, the Micro Four Thirds system is just fantastic, especially when you're trying to get into filmmaking. I think that the Panasonic G80 is a great starter camera because it's got inbuilt body stabilization. We've got 4K at 24 and 30 frames per second, and we've also got some really nice features such as a flip out screen, which even some of the high-end full frame cameras don't have. But like I said, there are a few things that I wish this camera had, and I can't deny it. It's the 120 frames per second for shooting that slow-mo B-roll. I mean, it's something that I absolutely wish it had. I also wish that for my thumbnails, 60 megapixels is absolutely fine, but when I'm looking at doing maybe more professional photos, I wish it had a higher megapixel count. Also, I wish it could charge from its USB point. This is something that this camera just doesn't have. Also, for any filmmaker, it's really important that we've got a very strong log profile. Now, the Panasonic G80 doesn't have a log profile. It has a Cine-like D profile, which is as close to log as possible, but it's not a pure log profile. I also wish it had a microphone jack. This is something that I really miss. And to monitor my audio, I think it's really important to be able to monitor my audio on the go. Now, Panasonic has announced the Panasonic G90, which is the successor to this camera. And my word, does it have a lot of the features that I've been wishing this camera had. Now, I just want to put it out there. Yes, the autofocus isn't great on this camera, but it is a lot better than the Panasonic G80. There are huge updates that Panasonic have made to this, and I absolutely love the fact that they are continuing the development on Micro Four Thirds. Now, for a lot of professional filmmakers who use, let's say, the Panasonic GH5, ask them. They don't use the continuous autofocus on that camera. It has some of the best codecs for its price range and some of the best 4K recording in its price range as well. But they all typically use manual focus. And that is going to be the same situation with the Panasonic G90. Now, I think this is a good thing because this will push you as a content creator to really learn and understand how to manual focus, how to rack focus as well, because these are skills that you're going to need to use when you step up to the high-end cameras like the Reds, like the Ariel X's. You know, those don't have an autofocus system. It's all done through manual lenses. So you're better off learning now than later down the line. So one thing that I do with all my footage is I set my color profile to Cine-like D. Now, the Panasonic G90 has got a V-log profile. This is amazing because we're not going to lose many details in the shadows and the highlights, which means that along with the 420 8-bit in-camera filming, we're able to push the colors a lot better than in the predecessor, the G80. So what that means is that you can color grade with much more accuracy and get better colors out of it. Now, with this having V-log without any paid extras, this is actually the cheapest camera on the market to have this feature. Now, you may be asking, well, it's got 420 8-bit inbuilt recording. Has it got 10-bit? Has it got 422? Yes and no. So no, it's not got 10-bit recording, but it does have 422 8-bit external recording. So if you have an external monitor, then you can take advantage of the 422 8-bit footage. Now with the G90, you've got a few resolutions and frame rates that you can film in, but there are two that I think are going to be really important, and that is going to be the 4K 24p, as well as the 120 frames at 1080. Now I think that these two frames is pretty much what you're going to be using mostly if you're doing a lot of YouTube stuff. I think these two frame rates is really where people like to stick at. It does have other frame rates and resolutions as well, but these two I think are going to be really important. Having the 120 frames for the first time is going to be incredible, because that just allows me to shoot that nice, smooth, buttery B-roll. Now the downside to the 120 frames at 1080 is that firstly, it doesn't record sound, which for me isn't too much of an issue. And the second thing is we don't have continuous autofocus when we're shooting at 120 frames. But again, I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue, because especially when we're filming B-roll, it's going to be very short clips anyway that we're going to be slowing down. As long as I nail the focus within about 5 seconds, I'll be able to have nice smooth B-roll for 3-4 times that time. Now, if you don't know already, Panasonic has some of the best preamps for microphones on the market. I am always amazed at the quality of the sound coming out of the camera. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. I use the Rode Video Micro, which is paired up with, again, the Panasonic G80, and the preamp in that is fantastic. But one thing that I wish I had was the ability to monitor my audio straight from the camera. Well, now with the Panasonic G90, I'm able to do that, as they've added that functionality. So this is absolutely just mind-blowing. They've been really smashing the feature sets in the new G90. And again, I'll keep going because there is a huge list of perks when going for this camera. Now, talking about microphone and headphone, one thing that I really am happy that they have changed is the placement of the microphone jack. Now on the G80, the microphone jack was in the way of the tiltable flip out screen. Whereas on the G90, what they've done is they've actually raised the microphone port so that when you plug in a microphone and you're keeping your setup nice and lightweight, you can actually flip out the screen and tilt it however much you like without the microphone cable actually interfering, which on the G80 I'm not able to do very easily. Now, one thing that a lot of people haven't really mentioned is actually a little thing, but I think will make a big difference, and that is actually the ports cover. Now on the Panasonic G80, you've got these two flappy bits, and when you're plugging stuff in, you've got to try and move it to one side. And if you've got, let's say, an external monitor, you know, you've got to open these two flappy bits and then move them to the side. And then when you've got the monitor on one side, it just gets in the way and it's really, really annoying. Well, with the Panasonic G90, they've just made one flap and it opens outwards, so it makes it so simple to just plug stuff into the ports. And what's nice is that they've separated the microphone port from the rest of the ports, so I'm guessing Panasonic have sort of thought, well, most people aren't going to be using an external monitor with this camera and possibly any of the other ports. So by having the microphone port separate to everything else, you can really just focus on content creation and without having another flap open on the camera. Because on the Panasonic G80, when you plug in a microphone, you're also exposing the remote input as well, which I find just a little bit sketchy. Now, talking about ports, they've also have included USB charging and power as well. So you can power this camera from a power bank, for example, or some dedicated power solution like a VMAP battery or anything like that. And I think that's fantastic because the old Panasonic G80 doesn't have that feature. Now, one thing that I'm a little bit annoyed about is it's not USB-C, and I just feel like they kind of cut a corner there, because if it was a USB-C cable, then, oh my God, that would have been absolutely fantastic. It would have been one less cable for me to bring, especially when I'm on the go traveling. But I don't think it's a huge issue, because a lot of the charging devices that I use do use micro USB, so I'm going to be carrying that cable anyway. Now, they've kept the flip out screen, which I know a lot of us content creators really want, and they've also updated it. It's come from an LCD display to an OLED display, so the colors and the contrast is just fantastic on this new camera. So in terms of button placements, there are a few notable changes that have come from actually its older brothers, and I think they're a welcome addition. So it has dedicated buttons on the top near the record button, and this is ISO, white balance and exposure compensation. And I'm glad that they've added this because it was so frustrating for me to have to push these buttons on the back of the camera and then having to adjust each setting using either touchscreen or the dial at the front or anything like that. It was just a massive pain. Now, what they have done, which again I really like about this new camera, is that they've moved those buttons to a scroll wheel now. So navigating through the menus is going to be a lot easier, a lot quicker, and also adjusting some of the settings is going to be a lot easier as well. It's really nice to see that they haven't left some of those nice tactile features on the higher end cameras and left it out on the sort of entry-level professional camera. Now, with these three buttons on the top, they are actually slightly different with tactile and feel. So they're sort of in a step level, and they also feel different. So when you're just quickly trying to change the white balance or the ISO or the exposure compensation, you know exactly what button to press without having to look really at the buttons. So in terms of building the G90, this is going to be a proper professional starter kit. So when you've got a camera cage, you can start to think about, okay, how am I going to power the camera? You're not going to have to worry about dummy batteries anymore. You can power it straight from the USB. So you can use different types of solutions for that, as I think there's more solutions for USB power outputs. Now, the biggest change from the old camera is that we have got 4K unlimited recording. This is a huge game changer because, for example, I've done a couple of shoots where they have been a lot longer than the half an hour, and I've had to pause and then play again, and that just does not look good. And you can record on the UHS-2 card slot, and yes, it's only a single card slot, but cameras like the Canon EOS R and RP only have one card slot, and they're charging nearly £2,000, if not more, for both of those cameras. And the funny thing is that both of those only shoot 120 frames at 720p. I mean, that's pretty embarrassing, seeing as the G90 at half the cost can do it at 1080. Now, last but not least is, let's talk about it, the image stabilization. This is something that they have pretty much nailed since they started development on the inbuilt body stabilization. And it's nice to see that the Panasonic G90 has pretty much the same stabilization as its bigger brothers. Getting nice, smooth, gimbal-like shots is really possible with the new Panasonic G90. Now, you may be saying, well, why is stabilization so important? Well, it isn't, but it is at the same time. When you're at a run and gun situation, you don't have time to set up a gimbal or anything like that. So being able to just grab the camera, press record, and then get nice smooth shots is honestly something that you will really come to appreciate. So what are my final thoughts on the Panasonic G90? Well, let me tell you why I think it's great. Firstly, the weather sealing. You've got the same weather sealing as the predecessor. You've got 4K at 24 frames and 120 frames at 1080. You've also got a lovely native lens selection choice, and they are very, very affordable compared to its full frame rivals. You've also got a microphone and headphone jack, which is fantastic. You've got 4K unlimited recording, and with the button layout, this is going to make changing settings on the fly really simple to do. So this camera isn't quite out just yet. It's going to be a couple of months before it's properly launched. There are a few reviews out there at the moment, and I've kept my eye on it. But for me, this is definitely something that I'm going to be investing my money in. It's only a slight upgrade to the G80, but I feel like the improvements that they've made, not just spec-wise, but also ergonomics as well, I think it's going to really be a game changer. When there are links available, obviously I will put them down below. But until then, look after yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care, everyone.